And hello again, and welcome to Tuesdays with Lloyd. My name is Pat Talley, Regional Director and Managing Agent Practice Group Leader for Lloyd's in the U.S. Today, we bring you 2023's first installment of Syndicate Showcase, an ongoing series where we welcome senior executives from a managing agent's leadership team to have them comment on a variety of topics, including market conditions, U.S. business plans, threats, opportunities, and a host of others. It also provides an excellent opportunity for our audience to ask guests questions during the Q&A. Since we first launched Syndicate Showcase a few years back, we featured C-suite executives from Apollo, Hiscox, Aegis, Ascot, Munich Re, Dale Underwriting, MS Amlin, Hamilton, and Atrium. And today we are very pleased to welcome Asta Managing Agency Limited to our forum. Joining us from Asta today are Keith Nevett, Head of Business Development, and Julie Gallagher, Head of Client Management. We've included a brief biography for each panelist in the chat box for your further review. Before we begin, some quick housekeeping. We do encourage you to submit questions during the discussion, but please use the Q&A box instead of the chat feature. It makes things easier on our end to manage and help ensure that we answer as many questions as possible. Today's session is being streamed live on Lloyd's YouTube channel and will be recorded. We'll drop a link to the channel in the chat box, and we encourage you to share it with any colleagues and clients you think might have interest. We now have dozens of previous Tuesdays with Lloyd sessions available for on-demand viewing, including all the syndicate profile sessions we just mentioned. And with that, welcome again to our guests, and let's just jump right in and get started. Keith, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit more about Asta, and what makes it unique and sets it apart from the rest of the market.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. So Asta, we are unique. We are independent in terms of we don't have any of our own capital at risk. So we are, we don't have our own syndicate like other managed agencies that you may have been aware of. We are a pure third-party managed agent that provide all the necessary reporting and oversight for a number of syndicates that we manage, that we help set up and manage. We've helped over 30 syndicates join the platform over the last 10-15 years, and that tends to be so. We help them get up and running. We advise them, guide them on their business plan, and enable them to be part of the Lloyd's platform, which is a fantastic platform. Most of our syndicates aren't really aware of the Lloyd's requirements when they first join us, and our role is to help them through the process, position them to enable them to either grow and become very successful businesses and potentially transition to their own managing agencies. And we help them through that process, or stay with us over their tenure, and over time they take on more day-to-day responsibilities, partly because they don't really want to be regulated by the PRA, and they'd rather leave that burden to us as the regulated entity. In terms of our role, our role really is to translate the Lloyd's specifics and nuances to them, and that's our key role. Asta does all the regulatory work, while the syndicate focuses on what it does best in terms of underwriting and the distribution. I think since we've established in the third-party syndicate platform in 2008, we've continued to grow, and we now have 18 syndicates under management, with over 2.5 billion gross written premium under our management.
Wow. So those are some striking statistics. I mean, just say it definitely sounds like a successful model. It's clear there's an appetite to engage someone to manage the day-to-day support functions of a syndicate, and which, like you said, allows them to focus more on successfully underwriting the business. That's agreed?
Exactly. And as I said, we've enabled we've enabled 8 quite significant entities to develop, grow where they had no Lloyd's presence, no real Lloyd's understanding, and have evolved and created their own managing agencies. So, the likes of, Score, Axis, Nefilla, some big entities to, over time, over the 3, 5, sort of 10 years, to build their own platform, their own infrastructure, learn from us, and then transition their syndicate across to their own managing agency once they get the full regulated approval. So that's a model that works well, and so to have helped quite some significant names to establish their own Lloyd's platform, and to see them grow from that has been fantastic to see. So
that's a launching pad, if you will.
exactly.
Julie, let's pick up on that point with you. Can you maybe provide us a little additional context on Asta's client base?
Yeah, so I think Keith was saying we've got 18 syndicates under management. 11 of those are kind of your full, more traditional syndicates. We've got 1 special purpose arrangement, and then 5 syndicate boxes, and unfortunately 1 syndicate in runoff. But the size of those syndicates really sort of varies. So I think the largest one we've got is about 400 million of gross written premium, and the smallest, which is syndicate box, is about 20 million sterling of premium written a year. Kind of the average is around 100 and 150 million, and it kind of really depends on the maturity of the syndicate, kind of what what business they're writing, and the appetite of each syndicate, depending on where they are in their growth period. So we've recently had, this year, we've got 2 new syndicates that were given approval from Lloyd's, and last year 5 syndicate boxes. So some of the portfolio is quite new into Lloyd's, so they tend to be a bit smaller to begin with. Another way they kind of vary is by class of business written. Probably within Asta, if you look at all our syndicates, we probably cover all risk codes possible within Lloyd's, probably able to offer that. And some syndicates kind of write a huge amount of classes, and some are kind of more focused on monoline. I think more recently we've noticed there's a trend away from more kind of cat focused business to more kind of longer tail liability, cyber, and with syndicate in the boxes, perhaps more entrepreneurial and sort of smaller, perhaps more consumer focused business. Finally, in terms of capital support, we've got a variety of different syndicates with different capital support. So we've got a few that are fully aligned, so 1 corporate member supports them, such as Everest. We're kind of more finding now that with the newer ones, often they come with a cornerstone capital provider supported by other kind of smaller corporate names and names and other corporate capital. And we've actually got 1 that is still fully supported by traditional Lloyd's names. So a big difference there. And it doesn't change the way we manage them. It's just interesting to note that there is lots of variety of different capital support out there supporting our various syndicates. And the one thing which is very different at the moment is kind of the operating model that each of the syndicates choose to operate under. It's quite interesting that out of our 18 syndicates, only 4 have box space at Lloyd's, which is kind of much more the traditional way of writing the business. Right. And then kind of the other way they're writing the business is either through UK company or via kind of, the normal delegated authority. But more popular now is kind of underwriting via syndicate service companies, which is effectively extends the syndicate outside of the UK. So you're effectively be able to write syndicate business outside of the UK to kind of give feet on the ground underwriting, access to local talent, access to local brokers, and underwriters perhaps being close to the risk they're underwriting as they've got better knowledge of the market perhaps. And we're finding more and more that is sort of the business that seems to be wanting to come into the Lloyd's market. In fact, a number of our syndicates don't even have Lloyd's. They don't have a Lloyd's presence. They don't have UK permanent staff. It's sort of they're based in Dubai, in the US, and in Australia, and they don't have permanent UK staff, but they're still able to operate within the Lloyd's market.
So truly geographically diverse. In fact, it kind of makes me wonder, would it, so you were already operating largely remote. Is it safe to say that, the COVID disruptions that we saw, was that probably easier for you to manage in some respects than it might have been for others, just because of the very nature of how you're working remotely to begin with?
Yeah, it was quite interesting actually, because we onboarded quite a few new syndicates in that time. And it was probably the first time we'd onboarded new syndicates not doing it face to face. And actually it did work incredibly well. And they've all been successful. And that kind of sort of followed on, hasn't it, with syndicate in the boxes when they are more remote. It just shows that you can do it via Zoom or via Teams, and it's worked incredibly well.
Yep.
Yeah, it's surprising what you can accomplish when you really have to.
Exactly. When you're forced to, yeah.
Julie, let's follow up on one aspect of this. In your overview, you referenced syndicate in a box. Both you and Keith did several times. I think that that's something that perhaps many on the call may, some would be, but many may not be that familiar with it. So maybe let's unpack that a little bit and give us some background on Syndicate in a Box, what it is and what it was designed to do.
If I was to kick off, and I'll pass over to Julie on that, Pat. So Syndicate Box it was a new framework introduced in 2019 as part of the Future at Lloyd's. There was a big splash, with Lloyd's, at the Future at Lloyd's, and there was 6 work streams. One of them was Syndicate in a Box. And it was really to allow more innovative, entrepreneurial and smaller syndicates to become part of the Lloyd's platform, because Lloyd's, it's great, but you had to be a certain size to make it economically viable. So what the Syndicate Box framework enabled was for those smaller, syndicates around the 20 million, as opposed to near $100 million. So you could be $20 million, $25 million, and actually get going. And it was a good initiative. And just want to make sure everyone's clear that a Syndicate Box is still a syndicate. It has exact same attributes as any other syndicate, or as a normal syndicate. It's just operating in a different framework, and I think Julie's going to cover some of those points in a minute. But I just wanted to make sure that's very clear, because people do get confused that around a Syndicate Box or a syndicate is ultimately a syndicate, whatever whether it's a captive syndicate, whether it's a Syndicate Box, whether it's a normal syndicate. It's just operating in a slightly different framework. And one of the key things, Asta were part of the project team, working with Lloyd's on the criteria and the framework back in 2019, and to be part of that, given our vast experience of setting up a number of syndicates over the years.
Sure.
That's why we were asked by Lloyd's to be part of the team, and that was very useful for us. So I'll put your hand over to Julie to give a couple of specifics.
Quickly, in terms of the criteria of the type of business that Lloyd's are wanting in for the Syndicate in a Box. So I think generally size, we've sort of said it starts at around 20 million, and I think can't be greater than 100 million in the first year. There has to be kind of a differentiator. So there has to be something around the business that wouldn't often get into a normal Lloyd's syndicate, kind of maybe if it's tech or something special about its distribution or class business or geography. So there has to be something about it that, Lloyd's are happy with. Lloyd's have sort of suggested that they wouldn't want anything. It can only be incidental exposure to Lloyd's cat perils. So kind of US wind, US quake, Japanese wind, Japanese quake, and EU winds. It can only be incidental. You can't write that as a kind of standalone business. They ideally don't want cyber. They want predominantly short tail business. But what they do is they say that you can come in, they will effectively agree a 3-year business plan for you. And as long as you don't materially change from that, your business plan is approved on a sort of very quick basis. And so there's much more certainty perhaps than in the first or second years of a full syndicate. It gives more of that certainty. But if you don't reach those KPIs, then Lloyd's do have the right perhaps to put you into runoff sooner than you would do with a full syndicate. So they're kind of ups and downs. And Lloyd's have sort of made some of the application process a bit cheaper. They've reduced the number of returns that are needed, kind of in line with the reduced risk deemed because of the size of the premiums that we're talking about. So kind of Lloyd's have done quite a lot to try and make it sort of much more easy to get in.
Yeah, it's much more risk-based approach. So given the size, the quantum, it was felt that you didn't have to put a whole Lloyd's oversight regime over something that's smaller. So that's where Lloyd's have come up with this different framework. So and we've been, as Julie said, we've got 5. We have set up 6. There is the success story of carbon underwriting, where that was a syndicate in a box and has graduated to a full syndicate. And we hope that some of our other 5 will hopefully mature as they evolve over the next couple of years.
Yeah, kind of with the carbon, it's tried and tested. They started off relatively small and they've grown quite quickly, but it gave them the time to build up that kind of their infrastructure without having to write such large premiums to begin with. So it's sort of tried and tested approach to the full syndicate status.
So they have no box space at Lloyd's.
Correct.
No. Yeah.
That was one of the stipulations to, in essence, keep the costs down, Pat. So that's why
So essentially, I guess, summing it up, it's a fast track lower frictions, speed to market type approach to establishing a Lloyd syndicate that if it's successful, it will effectively evolve into the same status as a traditional syndicate.
Exactly that.
Exactly, and it'll be operated. Yeah, so it will just graduate and just be operated within a different framework. So given the size, and because it should get up to around 100 million before that graduation, sort of before it graduates.
So definitely adding flexibility to the process. Okay, great. I'm glad to get that kind of clarified, because this that's a relatively new development, but it's, as you've demonstrated, it's clearly gotten traction and taken off, and we expect to see continued growth there. Now I'd kind of like to pivot to a topic that I think will also probably hold a lot of interest for our attendees, but I suspect that many of them may not be aware of, and that would be the Captives at Lloyd's initiative, or literally, establishing a syndicate within Lloyd's to house a captive insurer. So Keith, maybe if you can give us a bit of background on that initiative, what the captive initiative is and how it came about.
Yep, certainly. So people probably may or may not be aware, but there were some captives back in the late 90s. And they were, ironically, they were managed by us as a managing agency. We were called Whittington at the time, and not Asta. So there was Samsung, there was Nissan, and there was SmithKline Beecham, sort of a pharmaceutical company in the UK. So they were quite big entities that established captives back in the late 90s. So we know that Lloyd's has, the ability, the infrastructure, the status to manage captives. They ceased for various reasons. They only lasted for a year or two for various reasons. But we know that it is there. The syndicate in the box framework was really the catalyst for us to relook at the captive market, and that wasn't just us; that was also Lloyd's. I think enabling a syndicate to be managed in a more cost-effective way, would enable captives to see Lloyd's as a viable, solution for their risk financing sort of proposition. So, because we know, captives are very conscious around costs, and so I think the syndicate box framework was really that catalyst to move it forward within us. So in 2020, we started working with Lloyd's on the framework, and this has taken longer than we would have liked to button down, but it has been approved by all the regulatory boards at Lloyd's, including the council, and so it's got the full support of the exec at Lloyd's, and as Pat, you and I have discussed in the past, we feel that it has been communicated to externally in quite a passive manner, and today, and hopefully, with the likes of this presentation, this webinar, hopefully that will become more prevalent in the coming weeks and months, that Lloyd's are looking to be a little bit more vocal around the whole proposition. So that's really where it's come about and how it's sort of matured, Pat. So
I think you said you recently spoke at was it World Captive Forum?
Yes, that was the beginning of February, and that was well received. I've never really spoken publicly like that much before, but the fact that I was I'll say mobbed as I got walked off the stage was interesting, and some people said I've never seen people sort of gather around the speakers so prominently after a presentation. So I see that as a positive thing. A lot of people wanting to share the details, wanted to carry on the discussion, and those discussions are still ongoing with prospective propositions and advisors. So it went well, and hopefully there'll be more opportunities where we can speak to more people.
Sure. Well, let's drill down a little bit. So, we all know that there are, dozens and dozens of captive domiciles, literally thousands of captives, each probably, targeting a certain niche or need. What are the benefits of the Lloyd's value proposition in terms of captives? Why a captive at Lloyd's?
As I think I mentioned earlier, there isn't a better platform globally than Lloyd's in terms of managing a global insurance platform, because you've got the advantages of the license network that Lloyd's has. It has 80 direct licenses across the world. It's got onshore reinsurance in 100 geographies and countries, and it's got offshore reinsurance in over 200 countries.
So that, I guess, the first and foremost, we typically think of the structure as, where the absence of a license, you have to secure a front. So we have fronting companies. So because of Lloyd's diverse trading rights, there'll be less reliance, or necessarily less reliance, on fronting, and of course the associated fees that go with that.
Exactly. You don't, rather than potentially having different captives in different domiciles, all you need is potentially one syndicate, and that will just manage your insurance risk under one platform, rather than having potentially a captive in Europe, and then Cayman or Singapore. You can have it under one syndicate. Makes life a lot easier to manage and control. So I think is one of the big significant advantages of a captive at Lloyd's. The other is obviously the rating. The rating that Lloyd's has, and the brand reputation that it has. So that was my next question. I'm thinking, so typically if you have a front that's reinsured into a captive that's likely unrated here, so a captive syndicate would enjoy the same financial strength rating of the Lloyd's market as a whole, correct? Exactly. As I said, it's a bit like the syndicate in a box. A captive syndicate has exactly the same attributes as any other syndicate in terms of the full rating, and that all syndicates enjoy. So possibly reduce need on fronts, which gives you more control of your risk appetite, the financial strength ratings, and then I'm sure there's some in terms of capital benefits. So what comes along in those lines? Well, we think obviously we need to work through a pilot, a test case, but we believe there are going to be significant capital benefits. So you wouldn't necessarily have to put up any collateral of any kind. You'd have to put up your funds at Lloyd's, which I suppose is your collateral, but that's worked out on an annual basis with your business plan. And once you lodge that capital, that's it. For the year, you won't be asked by fronting partners, or you won't be asked by Lloyd's to top up, because that's not how Lloyd's operates. So because we know that there's examples where fronting partners, their risk appetite change, and they ask for more collateral to be lodged to support the risk they're writing. With Lloyd's, it's part of the annual business plan process. You put up your funds at Lloyd's, and then it's you're done for the year, and then you then wait for the next cycle. So that's it, which is one advantage. Of the other advantage, if you also have risks in domiciles where Lloyd's doesn't have a rating, and you still need a fronting partner, the syndicate reinsure the fronting partner, because the syndicate is rated. You wouldn't necessarily again have to put up the collateral, because the syndicate as a reinsurer is rated. You don't. So that's another advantage, we believe. So collectively, it sounds like a lot of these lead to more control, going back to the captive entity. I mean, more control of their risk appetite, and more driving their own destiny, as it were. Although I was going to come to that, I think that control, is the biggest benefit of Lloyd's, because again, it makes, as you said, it drives the decision back onto the captive to make the decision. It's their risk appetite. It's they can control the wordings, the coverage. So in essence, it provides the captive syndicate, the captive entity, with the control required, as opposed to, as you said, leveraging or needing to get the fronting partner to approve everything every time they want to do something. So. Right. So taking that all in, what would you say or identify as the target market or for this, or who would be, what would the ideal candidate for a Lloyd's captive sort of look like? This is where the Lloyd's captive initiative, as I think we've said on the syndicate in a box. The syndicate in a box is the framework is applied across the captive syndicate. So again, it has to probably be a certain size. So this isn't something that's going to fit all captives and all potential captives. We believe the premium is probably around the $25 to $30 million in terms of minimum gross written premium,
which is good size in relative terms for captives, I would think.
It is I think, yeah, that's what I mean. So from our sort of due diligence and our sort of market research, there's a lot of captives that are sort of 5 to 10 million, and it's quite a niche area that we sort of Lloyd's is looking into in terms of the $25 to $30 million gross written premium on an annual basis. It's quite a niche number of captives, but we believe they are out there, and we believe that there will be interest. So really, it's going to be multinational groups that will be looking at that have sophisticated risk management in place. I think an entity that wants to take more control of their destiny rather than being relying on fronting partners to dictate what they can and can't do. I think also it's probably more of a phase 2, we believe, but we think it's pretty attractive to captive managers in terms of creating a sort of a protected cell companies type structure, where that could work in terms of protected cells. It could be risk retention groups that could look at the Lloyd's initiative as well. So there's a number of, in terms of the target market. I think pure single cell captives are going to be, it's quite a niche market, but we believe they're out there, and we've been in discussions with a number of them to date. So
I had not even thought of that. Yeah, risk retention groups, which are quite significant slice of the self-insured market in the U.S. under the federal RRG Act. So those are formed as captives. So it looks like there's a target-rich environment out there. We've covered a fair amount of ground here, and in the first 30 minutes, we do want to pivot to some questions that are queuing up. But before we do that, I mean, Keith, Julie, do you have any sort of overall messaging on captives that you'd like to get out or leave with the group before we jump into questions?
I think I've just got sort of one or two. I think one is I would encourage captive managers, brokers, to investigate the Lloyd's proposition more fully. And Lloyd's isn't as complicated as it can seem. And it is an amazing platform and can be a significant enabler for any entity going forward. And the other one is really, we believe the captive initiative, it's not to replace existing captives or captive managers. This is complementary to a captive offering. So where you've got, you may have 1 or 2 captives already, you could consolidate potentially, with Lloyd's, or but with Lloyd's appetite will not be for every single class, but where Lloyd's appetite fits what you want to include in a captive, then it could be very beneficial to your sort of risk financing sort of strategy. So
complementary. I know, yes, a lot of large international organizations may have 2, 3 captives, so maybe they collectively work together or something along those lines.
Correct.
Julie, any other thoughts from you before we go to questions?
Not on the captive side. I think in terms of what we could offer from an Asta perspective was we've got the framework set up for syndicate in the boxes, and we think it could be quite easily kind of replicated into how we therefore would manage the captives. So we've kind of got things set up ready to go effectively. So very positive.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, let's see. We've got a couple questions here. We'll see if we can knock those out. First one is, can you please provide more details about the 6 syndicates in a box approved, geos they operate, geographies, risks, etc., for our understanding of the fit for the program other than size?
Yeah. So I mean, so we've got Parcel, which is kind of it's data-driven cargo products, and they kind of use their own tech device, which kind of monitors temperature in a real time. And they focused initially on kind of providing vaccinations. They kind of was very quickly, it sort of set up in COVID times, they could provide vaccine cover using their tech. And that's now kind of expanded onto food supply chain, but very much focused on the data they can get from this little sort of temperature sensor. So that's one example of it. Another example is Greenlight Syndicate, who provide insurance for innovative MGAs and cover holders.
Yep. Micro insurance is what it is really. It's embedded products. Globally, particularly in emerging markets. So that's what they provide. Micro insurance, embedded products.
Yeah, kind of the platform economy, isn't it?
Yeah.
For micro. Carbon, their kind of differentiator was graphene. They've got it's kind of a tech solution to help manage bordereau and to sort of use lots of different data sources in order to then give information back to cover holders, information back to resources, reinsurance. And so they're using that data in a way that hasn't been sort of used before. And that is they write cover holders mainly in kind of Australia, Canada, and Europe, and not so much US based.
And then the other two are the Oman Insurance Company, based out in Dubai, and that was more of a sort of geographic sort of play. So the Oman Insurance Company was quite a significant insurance company in the region, in the Middle East, and they want to grow and diversify, and with the Lloyd's platform, obviously with the licensing, enables them to do that, more quickly, more efficiently. And then the last one is medical commercial insurance, so MCI. We do get MIC and MCI confused, but there you go. So MCI are a medical sort of liability entity. They do a lot of life sciences, but they were an MGA out of the UK, and they wanted to take more skin in the game, and which is what we see quite a lot. MGAs wanted to get more skin in the game and become their own risk-bearing entity, which is what a Syndicate in a Box does. So
sure. So pretty much a broad spread of different applications there that you're
yeah.
Oh, very different. Yes. Very different.
One question, let's see, how much of Asta's business is US business and how much is rest of the world?
Blimey, I'm not sure if we've got that analysis.
It used to be very heavy US based, and I say probably more recently it's moving. It's still 60%, I think. US.
Yeah, it's probably around that. Yeah.
Okay. And one last question, which I think you've sort of addressed, and I'm assuming this is as it relates to captives. What are the benefits of doing this via Lloyd's and associated costs?
So the costs is a good question. We didn't really touch upon that. We believe it's going to be more cost effective to operate at Lloyd's. We're going to say that, but we believe the fronting cost from our market research that we've done, we believe fronting costs around anything between 6 and 10% for a captive in terms of the fronting costs. The analysis we've done with Lloyd's, and it's been very much a collaborative effort with Lloyd's in terms of the costs, is we believe it based on 25 million pounds, so probably around just over $30 million. We reckon it will probably be about 5.7%, 5.5, and then obviously as the syndicate grows, potentially that percentage comes down. So we believe it's actually more cost effective to manage to have a Lloyd's syndicate rather than having a fronting partner.
So in balance over time, it equalizes out and becomes more cost effective.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, great. Well, it looks like we've reached a good stopping point to wrap things up for today's session. We've finished our questions. Keith, Julie, I want to express sincere thanks once again for your sharing your valuable time with us. It's most appreciated. So thank you. And so that will do it for this edition of Tuesdays with Lloyd's. I hope you found the discussion informative, engaging. Be sure to mark your calendar for our next installment on June 13th, when our session will be live from the Lloyd's Lab. As many of you know, the Lloyd's Lab serves as an incubator for innovative insurtech startups with market experts providing insight and support. The lab has been a resounding success, and on June 13th, the lab's Kieran Linger will host a discussion with teams who have successfully navigated and come through the lab and have found capacity in the market to begin writing business. So fascinating story. Be sure to join us for that. When our session ends in a moment, you'll receive a brief set of survey questions in your browser. Please take a moment to fill these out, and we encourage you to be completely candid in your comments. We completely rely on your feedback in helping us to build our content, so your support is very much appreciated. You can also drop us a note anytime at usevents@lloyds.com. So until June 13th, let's keep staying connected. Take care and have a great rest of your week.